Hello, everybody. Thanks for giving part of your lunch hour up for this program. So what we're going to be talking about is what are we going to do in this new world where maybe you have a new job since COVID, or maybe you're going to be working part-time remotely and part-time in the office as companies work to figure out how they're going to do that. And how are you going to make sure that your career continues in an upward way, and so that you can figure out also how you want to stay in touch with your friends in the office, make new friends, meet people to be your mentors, etc. So let's get going. So here's what I see as some of the key obstacles. I thought I'd start with the obstacles, and then we're going to go to the upbeat, how you're going to fix it. The biggest obstacle is you're invisible. You're invisible in many kinds of ways. You're invisible online in a meeting if you don't say anything, because it's not like an in-person meeting where if you don't say anything but you still are paying attention, you're part of the group. You can be just not noticed at all if you're online. You're invisible because you're not there. So what are you missing? You're missing all those ad hoc kinds of things, you know, when two people end up in the ladies' room at the same time, or everybody sits down together for lunch and you hear not only gossip, but you hear business things like, oh, you know, my team is planning to do this, or I heard that the other section is going to be doing that, or whatever. You also, especially if you're new or in a new position, tend to miss the cultural cues. Cues like who's on top, who's important, who's somebody that's less important, how does the firm like to handle things, how does the company let everybody know what's happening, what are the most important things that they do, how do they define collegiality. Sometimes you miss decisions that are being made, find out about them too late to participate or to take advantage of them. And of course, you miss your friendships. Solution is networking. Networking is not just going to cocktail parties. It's not just having lunch with people. It's not just meeting people that aren't part of work. The best thing you can do for your career is to build a really strong, informal influence network. So you do that strategically, consciously, in terms of where you spend your time. You want to network not just within your department, but across departments, meeting with other people who came in when you came in, other people who you think are interesting, people who you respect and would like to get to know, because perhaps later in your career, they could be mentors for you or sponsors. So you want to make sure that you're thinking broadly when you think about networking. And the most important thing about networking is be curious. You really want to learn about other places. The most important thing these days, there's a couple of words that go around and around and around. One is collaboration, but another one is authenticity. And how people tell that you're really interested in them is if you ask them lots of questions. If you respect what they do, whether you want to ever do it or not doesn't matter, but understand what they do and how it contributes to the whole. That's very important. It's also a way during your networking to learn about what your employer values. Where is it that they're going? What are their goals? Because suppose you find out that your goals and theirs are not in sync. You might want to move to another place, but suppose you find out that they are in sync, and you want to figure out a way in which you can move your career forward by aligning what you're looking for with what your employer is looking for. The other thing about curious is if you're really not curious and you're just asking the questions because I said so, or somebody said so, or you don't like pauses or whatever, people can tell in a nanosecond that it's a formulaic question for you. You need to show genuine interest in other people. You need to be as interested in them as you want them to be in you. What we call it in networking is give to get. Always offer to help people. Try and figure out how what you know and who you know can help whoever you're talking to move forward in where they want to go. So your goal for your informal influence network is to create warm, enthusiastic, genuine relationships. It's easier said than done. You have a brand. Everybody has a brand. We're born with them. We have them all the time. If you're smart, you want to promote your brand. You want to create your own reputation. So a brand is actually what people say about you behind your back. It's when somebody says, tell me what Susie's like, and I say, oh, I really love her. She's really fun to be with. She's really a great worker. She has terrific ideas. She's a little scatterbrained. Okay, there, I've done it. I've given you a brand that you don't want. You don't want to be scatterbrained. So I said 4 really positive things and 1 quirky thing. Maybe you don't want to be quirky. So you want to manage how you're seen. You do this through the thousands of things, people, actions that you touch every day. And you build it bit by bit so that pretty soon people have an expectation of what you're going to be like, of what they can expect from you, of what you're promising to do. You have to keep those promises. You have to meet those expectations. It can take thousands of touch points to make your reputation top of mind with other people, your brand. It can take 1 mistake to lose the whole thing down the drain. So, of course, you want to be liked, but you also want to be respected for what you can do, for what you know. You want people to know, whether you're in the office or not, that you're willing to work hard, that you're a team player, and that you're capable, efficient, knowledgeable, and enthusiastic, because these are the things that they're looking for. Then you need to think about what you need to know about your colleagues and your company where you work or your firm in order to align what you're talking about and what you're thinking about with them, because people always see interactions in the context of where they take place. So it's important to know that. It's important to know what your colleagues' values are and where they want to go and what they want to be in 5 years or 10 years. And then what's the company like? Not just their culture, their norms and their pecking order, but also what do they sell? Who do they sell it to? Where in the world do they sell it? If you make parts for oil company machinery and you sell to Venezuela, it's a whole different world than if you make oil parts for machinery and you sell to Texas. You need to know this. You need to know what are the pluses and minuses and the opportunities for wherever you work. You need to know who the competitors are and pay attention to them. See where they're getting ahead. See where you need to get ahead. It will give you some ideas to talk to people about. You always need to be on the lookout for mentors and sponsors because they're always there, but you can't always find them unless you really pay attention and really look for them. And when you talk to people, it's really kind of easy to start conversations. For people you don't know too well, ask them how they decided to come to work for the company, what they like best about working there, what they think is the best hack I need to learn to get my job done quicker, more effectively. Because networking, which is strategic, is intentional, you need to have a plan. It can't be just ad hoc. It has to be thought about and worked on all the time. Your plan really has 3 parts. The first one is a calendar. You need to use your calendar to make sure that you talk to at least 1 person a day, either on the phone or in a video chat, or if you're going into the office, maybe one of the days that you're in the office, 15 minutes, conversation about what's going on in your life, how can we work together better, how do they think I should be doing or you should be doing one of your tasks. All of those kinds of questions will play you'll see on another slide that we talk about planning the conversation. But you need to calendar the actions. So you need to assume that the other people have just as much to do as you do. So there's two things you want to do. The first thing is when you're setting the calendars, you want to say to them, when's a good time to have a conversation like this for you? Do you want to have it in the morning first thing? How about over lunch? I'll eat my peanut butter sandwich, you eat yours, and we'll talk between bites. Or would you rather do it end of day before you go home? Different people are going to have different answers depending on what their circadian rhythms are like and what their daily routine is like. But the fact that you've asked them already shows that you're an other-directed person, that you're empathetic to the responsibilities of their job and their constraints, just like you have constraints. You also want to ask them how they want to connect. So I write for the New York Law Journal. I have a bi-monthly column, and I have never seen my editor. My editor wants to talk on the phone only. And she says she is so sick of Zoom calls that she doesn't want any Zoom calls. If she wants to see what I look like, she'll go to LinkedIn and hope my picture's somewhat near my current age. Okay, I've never seen her. I have other friends or work connections who we always Zoom because we like it better. But you want to ask them how they want to connect, how they want to do it. And you don't want to do this by texting. You really don't want to do it by email either. If you have a question, you want to connect personally. Personally these days means if you're not in the office, if you're remote, phone or video. Next thing you want to be doing is taking a look at your contacts list, your connections that you have. Again, you're going to be thinking about it strategically. So you want to make a list of the top 10 people in your company or your firm that are important now and that you want to make sure you're talking to on a regular basis. Then after those top 10, you want to think broadly. You want to have two more sets after that. One of people that you know, but that you don't have to be in contact with as frequently, and people you don't know, but you want to get to know. And when you're making your connects calendar, make sure that there are people from every one of your subsets. Think very broadly. Think about people who can teach you about new ideas that are relevant, new skills, new outdoor activities, new ways of managing COVID lockdowns, things like that, so that you're not only meeting new people, you're expanding your own resources and your own knowledge base. When your goal is to build meaningful relationships, think time. It takes between 8 and 13 times to go from the first time you talk to someone until they become a trusted part of your network. That means 8 to 13 times that are important to either one of you. So every single one of them is not a call or a Zoom, but it could be sending them an article that's relevant. So I was meeting with a client last week who was talking about putting together an automated intake form. So to screen potential people who come to her website and want to use her services, because what she's finding is 1/3 of them are not appropriate. So we were talking about doing that. Today in my various feeds came an article on an invitation to a webinar where they're talking about exactly how to do that. So I sent it to her. That counts. Okay, nothing's free. Nothing is free. And so in order to make this communications plan work, you have to do some prep work. You have to ask everybody the same questions we talked about before. What device do you want to use? When do you want to talk? And then at the end of the talk, how often do you want to talk? But you also, when you're creating your online Rolodex, you have to make sure that you've included in who you want to talk to resources you might need. People in admin, in IT, people who run the help desk, or any other support staff who you might want to know before you have to go to them to help you with a problem. It's always easier if they can put the face and name together. It makes it seem less like you're just going to them and they don't count. You want people to feel comfortable with you, whether their job is at a lower level on the org chart or a higher level. And that's just important to do. So these resources are really useful, especially if you're going into a new position, a new company, or a new role. You want to learn and make sure that you are really good at the ins and outs of the technology. You know, most of us know how to use Zoom, but this isn't Zoom that we're on now. We're on something called Fuse. The only place I ever use it is Savvy Lady, so Maggie has to remind me every time about how it's different than Zoom. But you also want to know, how do I look? Am I sitting so I'm centered in my box? Am I using my resources appropriately? If I'm on something like Microsoft Teams, I want to make sure that I know how to use whiteboards. I know how to share documents. I know all of these things. Back to that Rolodex of resources that you're going to need to help you make sure that by the time you're doing them, you're comfortable with them. If your company uses Slack for Friday night cocktails or lunchtime water cooler lunches or anything like that, learn how to move from room to room in Slack. Learn what you have to do and how you have to do it ahead of time. You don't want to be the person standing there going, huh? What room? Where? Who? You want to be knowledgeable, because how you act in these situations is a key for people about that brand of yours and how you'll act when you're doing new work. You want to keep your boss up to date all the time. In order to get involved in current projects, you want to know what's going on. You want to give ideas. You want to suggest that you'd be delighted to help if, in fact, it's something that interests you. You want to make sure that when you talk to your boss about what you're doing, it's not just, hi, I finished the project on Charlie. It's, I finished the project on Charlie, and I'm wondering, are we going to be taking the next step with it? And by the way, when I was doing it, I had trouble getting the files for between 2000 and 2005. I don't know whether it was something I was doing wrong or we just haven't organized them in the new cloud-based filing system. So you want to ask questions, use that time to ask questions about what's going on, also to find out what's next. So it's not just, hi boss, check it off, it was due on Thursday and I did it. It's a little bit more. You want them to see how you think. Okay, now we have to do conversation prep. This is really important. Every single time that you're going to do an online or phone call conversation, you have to put into your calendar time to research. Now, if it's the first time you're seeing people, I would put in half an hour, 45 minutes. If you see them all the time, I would put in 15 minutes. Do not be lulled by the fact that you see them all the time. There are still many things that may happen that you don't know. So you want to do background research on people. Of course, you want to look them up on LinkedIn. You go to Instagram, Facebook, wherever you think that you might find them. You want to Google them and see what's on the first page. You also want to think about the topic of discussion, that one of the things that you plan to bring up, and make sure that you're up to date on the background of it. This means by doing this kind of research, you're going to get to the conversation ahead of the, I'm not ready for this question. So how are you? You know, nice to see you. What's going on? That's an I'm not prepared beginning. You don't look so hot. Don't do that. But if you go, you know, I'm so glad that we're having the conversation today, because, you know, I looked you up on LinkedIn and I read that recent article that you posted. I thought it was really interesting, and I was wondering what feed it comes from, because I might like to see some more articles like that. You look great. You know, in the 20th century, I don't know how old most of you are since I can only see first names, but in the 20th century, if people looked up other people's backgrounds, they would go, why did they do that? That's really creepy. Now we live on the internet. And if you don't look them up, they go, why aren't they prepared? That's so stupid. They could have known that. And sometimes you'll find out interesting things. Sometimes you'll find out personal things. Suppose you're on LinkedIn and you go to see what groups people are in, and you find somebody is in the rowers group, and there is one. So you could say, you know, I saw that you've been doing that. When did you start getting interested in rowing, in crewing, or are you actually doing crewing, or are you doing kayaking now? Okay, off to a discussion. And you don't have to have ever crewed or kayaked in your life. Believe me, I never have, but I can ask the questions. So after you've done some research, you want to set your own conversation agenda. Again, why? Because if you pre-think it, number one, you feel more secure about it. But number two, the kinds of questions you ask are going to show an intelligence of preparation that it's very hard to do on the fly. Some people can do it, of course, but I don't like to wing it. I would rather know a little bit and then wing within a safe environment, so to speak. So there's three parts to a conversation agenda. First one is, what do you want to learn more about? Is this a person that you think is going to become a BFF? Is just a person you really like? You have no work interaction with them, but you really like them, okay? That's a different kind of conversation than if it's somebody in your line of command that you want to get to know better, but you also want to learn more about their role in the projects you work on together. So think about 2 or 3 questions that are on topics that you care about. Then think about, okay, I can't just ask questions. This isn't a survey. So what do I want to contribute to the conversation? What have I been thinking about lately or doing lately that I want to share? And then finally, how are you going to define success of this call? If you're able to do what afterwards will define success. If you learned what will define success. The reason you want to do that is because one of the big things about networking and marketing is if you don't set success points for yourself, then it looks like nothing's happened. And pretty soon you're going to give up on this. But actually, you don't want to ever give up on this, not while you're actively working. Because while you're working, you always want to become a valued colleague and friend. You always want to show people how invested you are in what you're doing and how important it is for you to help your employer reach the goals that they want. So a final thing about meetings, if the meeting's going to take place at one of the chit-chat rooms or water cooler events or any of those kinds of things, which are now held online by many companies, that's going to be a different agenda than if it's just you, the two of you, talking together. So make sure that you know the context when you're preparing. Okay, back to that brand and the impression that you make. So if you're doing a Zoom, make sure you dress appropriately. I don't care what's on the bottom as long as there's something on the bottom, but I do care what's on the top that you can see. So the way Fuse does it, you actually can't see me because I'm really, well, it's hard because I'm really only 5 feet tall. And so if I didn't sit on a cushion, which is what I'm doing, you wouldn't see me at all. I would be totally behind my name. But you want to put on a bright, plain colored shirt. You don't want to wear black or white because they don't come across on the screen well. They kind of pixelate, white does, and it kind of sends off little blips of light, and that can be annoying to other people. And black eats light, and so that can make you look more somber than you want to. You want to do what news anchors do, wear one color on top. So unfortunately, I love to wear stripes. So all my stripes have gone back into the closet because on Zoom or on any of these, you want to wear plain colored shirts. The other thing you want to manage is your background. So what my reputation is as a authentic advisor who tells you exactly what she thinks. Sometimes things you don't want to hear, sometimes things you do want to hear. And that's what I say. I say I'm authentic, I'm honest, and I'm knowledgeable. I've been doing this for 20 years. And so when I tell you something's wrong, we're going to fix it. And when I tell you something's right, you're going to think that you got an A in kindergarten. Okay, so my first time using Zoom, I put a fake bookcase up. And a colleague of mine said, take it down. You just ruined your brand. You had that 3 seconds and you screwed it up. Okay, so now what you see is my cleaned up, well, I think it's cleaned up office. This is my real office where I spend my 8 to 10 hours a day. And the only hard thing about Zoom is getting it clean enough for you to see. On the phone, so managing your frame means you want to be in the center. You want to have your features lighted. I have a pliable kind of small ring light that is above my computer that has various colors of white, so I can make it more or less like sunshine, and it works very well. B&H, $10, I think. Then the other important thing, especially on the phone, but also online, is your voice. Your tone of voice is really important, that you keep it as pleasant as you can, and that you vary it. People don't like monotones. People don't like you to be whispering or kind of mumbling. It's hard. One of the things about Zoom as opposed to the phone is you need to speak a little clearer and a little louder. I don't know why, but the sound tends to get muffled on Zoom. I have not figured out why yet. The other thing you want to do is, humans like to mirror each other. That is, you sit back in your chair and cross your legs. If we're having a good conversation together, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm not even going to be conscious of it. So what can you do online when the only thing you can see is my head? You can mirror other people's language and cadence. Use some of the same words they use. Speak in the same cadence, the same speed, the same kind of tone they do. Some of this will come naturally, but in the beginning you may have to work at it. And basically what you're doing is mirroring. You're saying, I like you. I want to be involved with you. I want to be like you in some ways. And mirroring is what humans do all the time. It's how we have survived for 10,000 years. And then you want to make sure that you pay attention to your demeanor, because we can all see each other online. So make sure that you practice what's called active listening, which means instead of thinking about what you want to say next, think about what you're hearing. And then when you speak, reflect part of that back by saying, I heard you say, and then whatever it is you want to follow with. So practice that. Practice asking questions as well. And make sure that you appear interested. So how are you going to do that? Because for you to think that I'm looking at you, I need to be looking at my camera. But you really want to be watching all the other people. So one thing you can do is turn your chair so that your chair and your head are facing to whomever is speaking. Another thing is to pay attention to what they're saying, nod when it's appropriate, laugh, do all the things you would do in a meeting unconsciously, you may have to do consciously online. Now, when you're on the phone, if you want to have a good phone conversation, the most important thing to do is smile. If you smile, then all of a sudden, everything that you say has a lighter, more confident kind of tone. I don't know why, again, I just know it's true. Finally, follow-up. So what we say in networking is what goes around comes around. So if you say you're going to send an article to the person you talked to today, you better go out that afternoon. If you say you're going to follow up by doing some research and it's going to be ready Thursday, better get there on Thursday. The first thing you want to do when you come back home or wherever you're going to be is you want to write down some of the key points that you want to reference perhaps in the next call or in a meeting going forward, things that you learn, such as the name of their children or where they like to go on vacation. Because here's the dirty little secret: you won't remember by tomorrow. And by 2 days later, you'll forget you called unless you look at your calendar. So you need to write them down because you may want to use them again. It's a way of reminding yourself when you're doing that 15-minute brush up research of what you've talked about and what new things have happened about what you've talked about that you might want to bring up. You also want to send a thank you email. Not thanks for your time, but I really enjoy talking to you about, and then put in something from the conversation. And then, I'm looking forward to our next conversation, Charlie Brown. And then make sure that you put in your calendar what you want to do next. You don't have to ask them then to make a date to talk again or to meet again, but you want to put in your calendar maybe for 2 weeks or for a month away. You know, this is March, but at the end of April, I want to call again and see if we can get together. If you don't calendar, from my experience, it doesn't always happen. And finally, the last slide, I'm sorry, I'm a few minutes over, is be aware of what you look like, what your body's saying. Make sure you sit up tall. Make sure you look interested. Make sure you're always prepared for your conversations, that you participate in meetings, and that you use small talk before and after to kind of show friendliness on the phone, on the Zoom, whatever. And for your plan, make sure you're using it to showcase your expertise and contributions, your interest in the team, and in helping other people succeed. These will help you to gain informal power. When you do, you'll become a go-to person, and you'll be on your way to the head of the company. Thank you very much. That's it, Mag.
Thanks, Carol. That was great. We'll open it up for Q&A now. So if you have a question, you can use the chat box, or if you're on the phone, you can email info@savvyladies.org. And the first question that we have for you is asking, when working at a small, tight-knit company, do you think there's value in connecting with one of the small, say, 2 to 3 person teams who always work together, or should I be connecting with each individual separately?
I think it depends on 2 things. One is what the relationship is of that team to your teams, and whether they're linked through work, because then you might want to do all 3 together. Say, you know, let's do a lunch and talk about how we can help each other more. But I would also say get to know the people separately and find out how they grew this tight group. It can be interesting. It can be useful in terms of company culture. And it is a way of making friends and finding out if you would like to be included in the group sometimes. Okay, Meg?
Yes, okay, thank you. Next question is saying, my new colleagues are very active on instant messaging platforms, and they stay in communication by messaging or sometimes emailing. That's not my preferred method of communication, and I don't feel like I'm connecting with them. Do you think I need to adapt to their communication preferences instead of connecting by phone or video call?
I think you can do both. So one of the things I would want to know, if this is in a company situation or in a firm, is how did they get to doing instant messaging? You know, why did they decide to do that? Remember, for one thing, instant messaging is it's instant, but it's recoverable. People can see it. So if you say, Tony, the boss is a jerk, Tony can find it if he wants. So I'm not sure why they're using instant messaging. It doesn't sound to me like it fits particularly well in a work environment. I kind of agree with you. But what I would do is have individual meetings with them to get to know them better and to say, you know, how did you decide? I've not used it very much, and I wonder what kind of benefits you see. So you're being honest. You haven't used it very much, and you're being interested, why do you guys like it? And I would ask, one of the questions is, don't you find it distracting? How do you make sure that it's not too distracting? For me, I think I would be distracted every time I heard the ping from the instant messenger. So, be constructively honest, I guess I would say, but also do what you feel comfortable doing. Because if you're new with this group, you want to get to know them better. And the best way of doing that is one-on-one.
Okay, great. Thank you. This next question starts by saying, thank you very much for this, Carol. What is your opinion on not being able to see someone's eyes when their glasses are reflective?
You can't see their eyes really, even when their glasses aren't reflecting. So, yeah, mine are doing this. This is my new light. So I have to figure out, I have to ask somebody who knows more about it than I do what I do so it doesn't make it look like I'm wearing those reflective sunglasses. Even on a regular call, even if I took my glasses off, you can't tell. You can't tell if I'm looking at you. So to look at you, I have to do this. Now I'm looking, you think I'm looking at you, but I'm really looking at the camera. And so it's very hard to tell. That's one of the reasons that conversation flow is so awkward on video conferencing, is because we don't know the cues that we would get in a personal meeting. In a personal meeting, eyes regulate conversation, and we know when it's our turn. But on Zoom, we have no idea. So it's very difficult. So I don't have a really good answer for you, except to try yourself to make sure that your whole body is intentionally following the conversation, which you would not do at an in-person meeting. You wouldn't have to. And that's why you're doing that, because you want to show the other people in the room that you're a participant, even though it's little squares instead of table and chairs.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Another question for you says, I work in the nonprofit sector and want to transition into the private sector. I'm not interested in connecting with colleagues at work on LinkedIn, as I want to decrease the number of nonprofit connections I have in my network. Is it bad that I decline their LinkedIn invitation, especially because I only work part-time where I am?
One of the wonderful things about looking for a new position is it rarely comes from your best friends. It comes from what we call weak links, people that you know through work or through shared hobbies or interests, but you're not really close to. People that you follow because they're smart about climate or fish or food or whatever. That's where you really get links to things. So I would say, take them. If someone wants to link with you, link with them. Then take a look at their contacts and see if in their contacts are people you want to meet to help you get more towards the kind of private company that you want to work with. So you never have any idea. I always say people never know by looking at you who you know. So I've had a very checkered career, seven versions of a career, and I'm a political scientist by training. I know lots of politicians. You wouldn't know it if you looked at my LinkedIn profile. But you might find out, depending on what we were talking about, if we were linking together. So the other thing is the way to balance it is not to get rid of people in the nonprofit sector. It's to build up the other people. So go back and look at your college or your graduate schools and use the filters to find people who are in wherever you live, working at places you might want, and then begin to connect with them. Begin to connect with influencers that you want to follow because they're interesting. And because when they do say something, you want it to come up in your feed. Begin to look for groups on LinkedIn where you'll meet people doing the kind of thing you want to do. And then when you find a person who link with them. So build it out that way. You don't want to make it smaller. You want to make it as big as you can. Now, I don't know whether you're telling the people in your not-for-profit that you're looking for a different kind of work, but if you are, you certainly want to start looking through their list of contacts on LinkedIn so that you can begin to meet people the soft way by having someone introduce you. Next.
Okay, thanks for that tip.
Any more, Maggie?
Yes, I think we have one more, and that question is asking, as I think about reaching out to people I want to get to know, it's a little scary for me, and I'm not sure what I could be bringing to the conversation. What tips do you have for me to get started?
I'm sure that if you're more than 18 years old, well, I shouldn't even say that. That's saying I don't think children know much. I'm sure that you've done things, you know things, you have interests, you have hobbies, you have a previous part of your career, you have, even if you're very young, you have an internship you did one summer, or you were a camp counselor, or you went on a trip to Africa to build houses or whatever. Everybody has experiences they have that they can talk about. If you're doing it through work, you have shared work experiences. If the person is in a different division, you want to know what they do and how it contributes to what you do. You always want to know, how did you decide to work here? How does it compare to other places that you've worked? What's your favorite thing about it? Don't ask what do you hate. People never like negative questions, but ask what do you love? And casual kinds of questions, questions that you might ask the person sitting next to you on an airplane if they look like they would be interested in talking. And eventually you'll find things. And for yourself to talk about how you decided to work for this company, what it is you like about your job, what you can't wait to go back to once COVID lets us out of the house, for goodness sakes. I'm a theater buff. I can't wait to get back to 46th Street and sit down in a theater with other people and watch a show. So there's always something. That's a good question to ask. What are you looking forward to doing as soon as it's safe?
Okay,
just,
great.
Neutral, friendly questions.
Right. Okay, those are some great tips. Thank you. So those are all of the questions that we have for today. So I want to thank you, Carol, and I also wanted to let you know there were messages in the chat thanking you. Thanks for such a great presentation. I really learned a lot today. This was terrific. Thank you. So I wanted to share that with you, Carol.
Okay, thanks. So it says on the last slide how to reach me. If anyone wants to reach me, please do. If you decide you want to link with me, tell me that you met me on Savvy Ladies. I don't link with strangers, and I don't know any of your names. So thank you all for staying, and 15 minutes longer. I really appreciate it, and I hope I'll see you again sometime. Bye.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.